And hey, welcome back. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be, broadcasting from middle of nowhere, Georgia. Double secret location on double secret probation. And some of my friends here keeping me company. Some of our cat friends. I'm always surrounded by felines, it seems, because we have our little shelter going. And I've always got strays and abandoned cats hanging around. And here's two of them right here who jumped on me as soon as I sat down. So why not? Thank you for joining us, everybody, as we start to come in. And of course, if you are listening and not watching, this is Coffee Talk as I struggle with a kitten. Here we go. Stand on the desk. This is Coffee Talk at Coffee Talk Live on YouTube as well as Prepper University. And you can also find me on fistfulofradio.com. And there it is, because I have a sticker here, fistfulofradio.com, where you can find me Monday through Thursday at 5 and Friday at noon. So please do find me there if you can. And for those of you who are listening and not watching again, I do try to read through as many of the comments as I can so that you can keep up, so that it doesn't sound like I'm just being crazy and talking to myself. And I'll read off a few of the people who've joined us here. Some of you are always here. That's Helter, Dragon, D-Lo is here, Keisha, Fluke Man is here, Legends, Boogers, Urban, Johnny Future, Armored Ghost, Monkey. Thanks everybody. And we have who else? Velvet Pilot is here. Thanks for joining us today. Those who chose to say hello, not everybody does, and that's okay. Department of Truth is here. Oh, careful with the Department of Truth. Very Orwellian there, buddy. As we get going, Fluke Man, if before we get into the news, Fluke Man, you're the one that had the religious question yesterday, correct? I just want to make sure before I say something here. Again, thanks to everybody who is joining us here today, along with my feline friends that I'm constantly surrounded by. And we'll get into the news here in a moment as we catch up after saying hello to some of the people who have dropped in to join us this afternoon. Well, it's afternoon where I am, and Fluke Man says yes. Okay, good. I want to show you this really quick. This might help you a lot. I'm going to share anyone else who's interested in biblical study also. I couldn't remember the guy's name yesterday. This is probably one of the best and most in-depth studies you're going to find. It's Torah Class Online. It's Tom Bradford, and Tom Bradford is a Christian Bible scholar and teacher. And this is some of the most in-depth study I've ever seen on YouTube. And just looking through here, again, that's at Torah Class, and he doesn't have nearly the number of subscribers that he should. But like, for example, here, right? You take a look at 1 Samuel, and it says 45 videos. That's 45 1-hour-long discussions dissecting just the book of 1 Samuel. You see what I'm saying? Or 2 Kings, 40 videos, 40 like 52 to 1-hour-long videos. Because I've watched a lot of these. My wife and I have also. And he breaks it down completely. He'll read the whole passage. He translates directly from the original languages. He compares and contrasts it with other translations. He discusses and exposes the classical definitions versus modern definitions, because that can really screw things up. For example, when I've talked about that love and hate from a biblical perspective have a denotation of action rather than being emotional. Love and hate didn't have emotional tags until after the Renaissance period. So when you read love in the Bible, they mean an action like dedication, for example. And when you think of love in the modern era, you think, oh, romance and loving someone and feelings. And that's not the case. But this is probably the best breakdown you're going to see biblically on YouTube. So I that's who I was trying to think of yesterday, and I found it and wanted to share it. Monkey says, going back on yesterday, what happens in your house in between two public school districts? Which one do you pay for? the one the child goes to, or both. Oh, if your house is between two public school districts, they've got it zoned somehow. So it's going to go to whatever district falls within your zone. So whichever specific school district, like if you, I want to say, for example, Topeka was a 501 school district, was the 501st school district. So if you even border another district, if you're still within 501, that's where the tax money's going from your property taxes. I assume you're talking about property taxes. But anyway, Fluke man, I encourage you to check that out. One problem you're going to run into with going to pastor, minister, bishop, whoever's in charge of whatever church you're going to, they only know whatever they've been taught. And if they went to seminary school, they learned how to run a church, but they didn't learn anything about the Bible. Again, my wife is a seminary graduate from a major seminary university at Beulah Heights. So there's, she went there hoping to get better biblical understanding and barely cracked the Bible open the entire time. They teach you how to give sermons, how to run a church and operations and stuff like that. But these guys, they don't know that much about the Bible, unfortunately. And I've been in that position where I've gone to church. I can't even go to church anymore. If I go to church and something doesn't feel right, or I'm like, that's not what that means, or that's not what that is. And you end up having a conversation with a minister who's been doing it for 20 years and you can trump them, something is wrong. Because who the hell am I? I'm nobody. Why don't they know this stuff? Why don't they know that there's no J in Hebrew, for example? Because I brought that up a few times, that Jesus is an anglicized name. It's actually Yeshua, not Jesus. That's something that we did to the name, or Europeans did to the name later on to anglicize it. Johnny says, biblically, there are only two kinds of love, agape and philo. And Monkey says, the public I went to in my childhood was the closest, while the other was a bit away. And yes, I wonder what it would do on property tax if you reside in an area between two school districts. I can't imagine it be any better. Fluke man says, thanks, David. I appreciate this. No problem. I just like I said, I was trying to remember the name yesterday. I knew it was Tom, and I was like, Tom who? Wait a minute, who is it? Because I know we've watched it before and been like, hey, this guy's really on track. He really picks it apart. And that's what you want, is somebody who's going to completely dissect it, explain the history of the time period, explain the social dynamics of the time period, tell you who the hell people are. This is what this group is, this is what this tribe is, and this tribe is here now, and this is what this used to be, and so that you understand it from the time period that it comes from, because that's the only way to really get a grasp on it. Now, this is something else that was mentioned yesterday as we start digging into the news, and that is, of course, it was brought up, something that Karine Jean-Pierre said to try to cover for Biden bolting on the poor old veteran. And I was like, I didn't doubt him when he said it, but I wanted to find the news story and take a look at it. Johnny says, thanks for telling us about him. That's a lot of content to learn from. Yeah, he's done the entire Bible this way. He's been doing it on his YouTube channel for over 10 years. And I think he's done every book at this point, but literally in 1 week studies, because he does it as his sermon at the church he's in. I think he's in Florida. He at Seed of Abraham Ministries. He sits there and he does an hour class after the sermon every day, and this is the class. So you're watching it from a live taping, and the dedication to take like one book of the Bible and spend 52 hours taking it apart, for example, that's incredible. And not a whole bunch of fluff and stories about your fishing trip and BS that you get from most churches. You know what I mean? Or, hey, how do these jeans look on me? None of that garbage. He cuts right to the meat of it and doesn't waste any time. It's like how a college class should be. But yeah, this came up yesterday, and it was talking about Jean Pierre covering for sweet old Uncle Joe, sweet old misunderstood Uncle Joe. Daily Mail has this article. It says Karine Jean-Pierre says Biden planned to walk out of the Medal of Honor ceremony because he didn't want to, quote, expose anyone, even though he took his mask off when he got on stage. I like how they throw that in, Daily Mail. So, what do they have to say? Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said Wednesday that President Joe Biden bailed from Tuesday's Medal of Honor ceremony before the final prayer to protect people from C virus exposure. She also tried to defend his inconsistent mask use on the heels of First Lady Jill Biden testing positive for the C virus on Monday, if that's even true. Who the hell knows? Biden's hasty exit Tuesday afternoon after honoring retired Army Captain Larry Taylor from his Vietnam War piloting heroics prompted criticism, as did the president's decision to stay unmasked while placing the medal around 81-year-old Taylor's neck. Taylor didn't have a mask on either. I don't think anyone in the room did they? A lot of people did not, if I remember correctly. Asking if it was a mistake for Biden to remove his mask indoors, Jean-Pierre said the president removed his mask, quote, to deliver incredibly powerful remarks, and that he wanted to honor the captain. Sure, he did. And for a brief time afterwards, he also didn't have his mask on, as you just laid out, and he left as planned. As it was planned, he left when there was a pause in the program in order to minimize his close contact with attendees who were about to participate in the reception, Jean-Pierre said at Wednesday's briefing. I don't believe that. He could have kept his mask on if he believed that. He could have backed away after putting on the medal when he did that. That's the first time a president ever bailed. You're supposed to wait until after the settling prayer at the end, and he did not. And it's funny to see this and to watch how they try to cover for him. With Biden dipping out before the final prayer, Taylor was left lingering on stage. The president did not put his mask back on after he departed, and that's true too. And here's a picture, and you see, I don't see one mask in the room, at least not from this angle. I don't see anybody wearing a mask. He doesn't seem that concerned. I don't think so. Let me catch up a few comments. Johnny says, hopefully people won't just single out Revelations for study. Yeah, no kidding. It's important. It's really important to get into the meat of of what's referred to as the Old Testament, particularly Leviticus and Deuteronomy. And just for the record, kids, Jewish children, especially Orthodox Jewish children who go to a Hebrew school, Leviticus is the first course of study. An 8-year-old could outstrip the average person on anything in Leviticus. And the reason they study it first is because that's where all the rules are. Monkey says, yes, Biden wants people to wear masks indoor again, or yet Biden wants, excuse me. Helter says it's disturbing that Biden's administration think people are really that dumb. They do. And I've said it a million times, people are not that smart, but when it's this obvious, it's insulting. It's even more disturbing to realize there are millions of people who really are or close to being that dumb. Yeah, that's where I was going. Anarchy is here. He says hi from rural Minnesota. And Urban says Biden runs away while Mitch McConnell freezes. Every robotic version has its own glitch. Yeah, I know. The Matrix is having a short. The Matrix is blowing out on you. And to cap that story off, continuing on with poor old, sweet old Uncle Joe. And this comes from USA Today. Continuing on with the mask. Don't tell them I didn't have it on. Biden flaunts not wearing his mask after C virus exposure. He jokes about it, like immediately afterwards in a different press conference here. And that's what this is. I think I can play this bit. No, there's an ad. I don't want to see the ad. Nobody wants to see the damn ads. We're sick of it. Come on. waiting for the ad to run, and I'll play this clip and you can hear him for yourself. Let me see.
Explain to the press.
Here we go.
I've been tested again today. I'm clear across the board. But they keep telling me because this has to be 10 days or something, I got to keep wearing it. But don't tell them I didn't have it on when I walked in. All right.
The president tested negative a couple of hours before this event. He tested negative yesterday. He tested negative on Monday. He tested negative today. He has no symptoms.
Yeah, okay. He's not going to either because the whole damn thing is a hoax. Armored Ghost says ADL says talking about the Matrix is hate speech. Is that what it is? Here we go. Resident in Chief Joe Biden joked about not wearing a mask Wednesday. I wonder if he knew that it was live, if he was being filmed at that point. Following this week's positive C virus test on his wife, First Lady Jill Biden sending mixed signals as White House officials insist that the president is following CDC guidelines. When it's convenient, Biden walked into the White House state dining room holding, not wearing, a face mask before delivering remarks to a room of reporters, White House aides, and stakeholders on a new contract between unions and shipping companies in West Coast ports. Quote, and you just heard him say it. Hopefully that came out clearly. Let me explain to the press. I've been tested again today. I'm clear across the board, Biden said as he got underway, holding up a black face mask. But they keep telling me because this has to be 10 days or something, I've got to keep wearing it, but don't tell them I didn't have it on when I walked in. Yeah, too late. After Biden spoke for about 10 minutes, the president left the room with his mask still in his hand, not over his face. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention advises individuals who were in close contact with someone infected with C virus to wear a high-quality mask when indoors and around others for 10 days, in addition to regular testing and monitoring for symptoms. You should also spray the top of your head with whipped cream, keep your thumb in your butt, and wear plastic bags on your feet for the remaining 2 weeks. It doesn't say that, but it's about as silly as anything else they tell you to do here. Dragon says Biden can't even fake empathy for the rest of us in an endless, unimagined pandemic he could have helped corral. And Eric Peters says I got to wear the mask for 10 days or something. He doesn't even know what the damn rules are. Yeah. Yes. And Eric Peter, you're the one that told us yesterday about Jean-Pierre trying to cover for him by saying that he didn't want to give him anybody the C virus, and that's why he ran out of the room, I think. Was that you? Because we just covered that a minute ago. And John is here. He says, hello or hi, fellow cat shepherds. I think they all abandoned me. I think I'm actually alone in the room from cats for the moment. They were all in here a moment ago or at the start of this, and they ran away. But yeah, I think he says that jokingly, don't tell them I didn't have it on, but I wonder if he realized they were already rolling, because he didn't look like he was kidding. And he'll usually try to joke things off and act like he was kidding, but he had it in his hand when he went in, and he had it in his hand when he walked out. He didn't put it on. He didn't have it on when he put the medal on the veteran, because he knows it's all a load of crap. He knows it's not real. He knows that the CDC guidelines are bogus. He knows that Fauci is lying to cover for a bunch of other people. He knows it's not that infectious, not that dangerous, that if he did have it, it wouldn't matter. And I have to call that an opinion just to be safe. Urban says, and still Biden ignores Maui, but not to worry, Oprah and The Rock are bravely gathering donations. Clown world. Yeah, they want to buy up that land so they can expand their properties out there, which surprisingly were unaffected. And Johnny says, did you see the video that Whoopi Goldberg has C virus? She's alone in a room wearing a mask and not doing The View. I didn't believe she's sick. She's an actress trying to scare people for what's to come. Yeah, I think it is too. Anytime I see any actor or actresses, or what's that other one that drives me nuts now? Lady Gaga with the headache medication. I care. I don't know if you have headaches or not. I don't believe you. You probably do. God knows what you take. But why would I care what medication you use? Stop trying to sell me stuff. I'm sick and tired of it. Rock Valley is here. He says, this is a great way to end my work day. Any way is a great way to end it as long as you didn't get fired. Monkey says it's weird people get freaked out over the virus and getting sick at stores. But yeah, prior to it, people were touching items with fingers that came from God knows where. Yeah, they don't care. You know what's funny too? What used to strike me as being interesting is when I'd be in the supermarket and you could see someone who had the gloves on and had the mask on and had the little bottle of hand sanitizer dangling from their belt, and they're clearly filthy. I mean, filthy, like hoarders, squalor, filthy, like haven't bathed in 6 months, filthy. You can smell them from like 30 paces away. They reek and they got grime dug into their skin and their hair is just matted, greasy mess. But they got a mask on and they're worried about getting sick or take a damn bath. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you're absolutely disgusting, filthy. But you'll put your I'm gonna mask up. I'm gonna put on my gloves. Sure, buddy. Sure. Monkey says was watching people from work retail back in 2020 and 2021. And Stefan says it's effing hot today. I guess it's hot where you are. It's hot here. It's about 90. Eric Peter says, yeah, that was me. Sadly, I am the wokest city in the union. And I say most people here are just fine with walking in line. That's unfortunate. And John says, I wore my gas mask to scare boomers. You need to get an astronaut costume from like the Halloween store. Walk around in that. Wear a full hazmat suit, all rubber and everything and hoses. Walk around like that. Put a biohazard banner on your shirt. Just really intimidate people. Scare them to death. Scare them to death. Why don't you? But yeah, they know it's a fraud. He's an elitist anyways. So he doesn't feel like the rules that are imposed on everyone else really apply to him anyway. And if he does do it, it's for show. That's why when he gets his jab, he's got to be filmed and photographed doing it. And I had put a post up on the YouTube channel on Coffee Talk a couple of years ago of the British or the mayor of London, I think it was, the mayor of London, getting his poke, but it had been noticed by someone in the photograph, and they made a big deal of it in the press. It still had the cap on, so he didn't actually get one. He may have gotten one, but that was just for press. It was a BS routine. The cap wasn't even off of the freaking syringe. So it's all theater. It's all theater, and it's disgusting. And we're all supposed to be that stupid. And again, most people, they're not that smart, unfortunately. But as for the rest of us, it's torture. Urban says, my favorite maskers were the smokers who would take a filthy thumb to lift the mask underneath and slip a filthy cigarette in their lips, replace the mask, and blow the smoke through the mask. Or the people who vape and they can't stop. And it's like, you ever seen the people with the vape pipes? It's worse than the smoking. They can't put that thing down for a minute. A lot of them. I mean, some people it's pretty casual, but a lot of people, they can't stop. They can't stop it. They love seeing that big puff of smoke coming out of their mouths. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But, you know, people are crazy, and it's an insane world that we've turned it into. Now, here's something on shoplifting. I thought this was interesting, and this comes from the Washington Examiner. Legalized shoplifting becomes a racket and minorities hardest hit. Are they? You could blame Victor Hugo. In 1946, the French novelist observed a young man being arrested for holding a loaf of bread he stole. Yeah, from Les Miserables. Deeply touched, he fashioned his novel Les Miserables. There you go. Published in 1862 around the character Jean Valjean, who was imprisoned for 19 years for stealing a loaf of bread and pursued relentlessly after his release by Inspector Javert. He wasn't released, he escaped. You may have followed the story sort of in the musical Les Mis, which began its run in Paris in 1980 and London in 1985. Or you may have heard the quip by the later French writer Anatole France that the law is the majestic equality forbids rich and poor alike to sleep under bridges, to beg in the streets, and to steal their bread. Curiously, some people, even in the United States in the 21st century, seem to think that the conditions Hugo and France described in their fiction still prevail here, even though their relevant writings were set nearly 200 years in the past, and no one without severe mental handicap goes hungry today for want of bread in countries such as France and the US. Now we get to the point. But the assumption persists that if someone steals, particularly if someone steals items worth small amounts of money, that person must be in dire want or acting to help someone who is. That's a lie. Didn't Karl Marx and others of Hugo's generation teach that mankind acts always and everywhere primarily out of economic motives? Something like this line of thought, perhaps without the literary references, explains the laws decriminalizing the thefts of items worth small amounts of money. Primary examples includes California law passed in a referendum in 2014, raising from 400 to 950 the amount of shoplifted goods, justifying a felony prosecution. Similarly, in New York State, stealing property worth less than $1,000 is a misdemeanor. So prosecutors, many financed by the left-wing billionaire George Soros, these two large states and elsewhere have effectively decriminalized shoplifting. Proposition 47 was pitched as a measure to relieve prison overcrowding and defined by an Associated Press reporter as not preventing misdemeanor prosecutions of those filching goods worth $949 or less. But of course, that's not what happened. Instead, shoplifting has become a mass and scary phenomenon encouraged by organized criminals who resell stolen merchandise, which is the point here, that he's contrasting when back in the day you'd steal food because you were starving to death, and there's really very few people that are actually hungry in America anymore. But they've decriminalized shoplifting to a point so that they can quote keep the jails from getting overcrowded, and have effectively legalized the theft. Now, what's really interesting, I'll make a point about this article here in a second. I'll catch up on a couple of comments. John says, I like cigars, whiskey, and hookers. Okay. And Fluke Man says, you mean Sadiq Khan? He's probably the worst mayor of London to have ever taken the job. Yeah, I believe that's who it was. And I put up a post showing him faking getting the jab. And man, people got pissed at me for that. They sure did. That was a couple years back. Johnny says, not to change the subject, but thanks for putting out the video about flea market packages. No problem. If anybody appreciates it. But yeah, that's how that works. Dragon says, if a shoplifter gets injured when someone is stopping them from stealing, I say they got what they deserved. If they were stealing, they wouldn't get confronted. The country is backwards. And here is prime mover. Now, here's what's interesting about this. This is a properly done article. And I'm going to tell you, story by Michael Barone. Michael Barone gets a kudos point for making a proper news article in a proper format. He even drew on literary history to compare and contrast his points. This is a very well-written article. This is what a newspaper article should look like. I'm willing to bet this guy must be like 70, because modern writers don't write this well. You know how I'm always picking on the bad syntax and the bad writing and things like that. This is a very well written article, and I'm looking him up, and it says Washington Examiner writer and lawyer, and he was born in 1944. Yeah, I was right. He's old, because no modern writer is going to write this good. That's a very well written article. I'm impressed, and rarely I'm impressed. Usually I'm annoyed at the bad syntax, the grammatical errors, the repetition. Like I said, anything that doesn't look like it would pass for an MLA paper should not be in a news article. Urban says things are not much better for store owners in Vancouver and even smaller towns in British Columbia. It is an epidemic of theft, lawlessness, and xylazine, fentanyl, heroin zombies rotting and stealing Band-Aids. They don't steal tinfoil. When I worked at Store 24 in Boston in the early 90s, they used to steal the tinfoil and the baking soda all the time. Helter says it's amazing how desperate people are going after expensive makeup, Gucci bags, and designer clothes instead of food and water. Yeah, exactly. And Keisha says our newspaper is written at a 6th grade level. Well, when I was a kid, this article was considered 8th grade. Think about this. Newspapers traditionally would write at an 8th grade level so that people who might have dropped out of junior high, even, which was common even back in the 70s and 80s, could still read a newspaper. So think about how simple they think people are now. Bingo says, I'm here late, but I'm here. How about the reports of voter fraud in the last week? Oh, you're going to get me in trouble. But anyway, yeah, no wonder. This guy was born in 1944. I'm not surprised. It says he's 78, and I had guessed he must be in his 70s just from the writing style. So, yeah, he absolutely should get a kudos point for properly writing an article, for knowing how to write. I'm impressed. But anyways, as we move on with the media and we get into the next article here, taking a look at something from New York, of course, and something involving the migrant crisis, if I dare talk about it again. Urban says, as for tinfoil, ever noticed that many packages are already opened on the shelf with only a small corner of the tinfoil ripped out? Yeah, that used to happen too. They tear out a piece or a small end or a piece or a section of it. That was pretty common. And Vicks inhalers. Vicks inhalers was another one. They'd steal those by the cart full if they could. Let me see here. Bingo says there's no hiding now. There is video and unsigned ballots, all kinds of proof. I'll have to look for that because I have not seen that yet. This is an article from the New York Post. It says, yes, Mayor Adams, the migrant crisis is destroying New York City, but you have to fix it. Uh-oh. Because he's been crying for weeks because New York is overwhelmed. As we read yesterday, they have more than 19,000 just inside the city limits of New York, more than 19,000 migrant children waiting to get into a public school because even though they are illegal and undocumented, they don't have birth certificates, they don't have social security numbers, they don't have visas, they don't have anything. The law still says you got to go to school. It makes me think of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. If anybody ever read that book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. I'm saying it backwards. Zarathustra. It's actually where the concept of Superman comes from, where they called him Uberman. And he's carrying a dead body, and he comes to a house, and the guy offers him wine and bread. And it's actually a dig on Catholicism. And he says, wine and bread for you and your friend. And he was like, my friend is dead. And he said, it doesn't matter. Everybody gets wine and bread. And that's in America, everybody goes to school, whether they like it or not, or whether they should be there or not, or whether they're documented or not, whether they can speak the language or not. Doc says, hey, Dave, just tuned in. Sorry I'm late. No problem. Glad you could join us. John says, all votes are invalid and taxation is extortion. Statism is a mental illness. Yeah, I got to quote that. Taxation is extortion because that's my thing. Everybody else says theft. I say extortion. Monkey says, oh no, Mayor Adams has to actually do his job as mayor. How shocking. Yeah. And Helter says, a year ago, Adams was on CNN criticizing other states about their handling of the situation and opened his big mouth about how New York City will do better. Oh my, how the tables have turned on him. Exactly. That's why you keep your mouth shut until you work through your actions. Let your actions dictate for you not your mouth. I'm tired of politicians, blah, blah, blah. Shut up. Or as they would say on Seinfeld, yada, yada, yada. So, reading into the article, in what's becoming a familiar refrain, Eric Adams teed off on the migrant crisis during a town hall Wednesday night. Quote, I'm going to tell you something, New Yorkers. Never in my life have I had a problem that I didn't see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this, he lamented. This issue will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City. Okay, so what are you going to do about it? Question mark. New York City's already been destroyed, all right? New York City's done. It's not the anybody. I would love for somebody who lives in New York. This is a question I would ask Donald Trump, because you all remember the letter, what is it? The Central Park Five, and how they try to use his letter to the people in the newspaper advertisement as proof of his racism because of the Central Park Five being exonerated, which, by the way, they were not exonerated. Read on it. They were not exonerated. They were released, and it was done for political motivation. They were actually guilty. The whole different topic of discussion. But if you actually read his entire article, it's really somebody being heartbroken over the level of crime in the city. There had already been 1,900 murders in New York City limits that year, which was one of the highest on record. Well, the average is like 400 to 500. It was an absolute epidemic in 1989 and 1990. And he was heartbroken and just calling out for the city government to do something. I would love to ask him, is this the New York you remember, or is it dead? I would ask anybody who's lived in New York all their life, is it dead? And for how long? Or is it on life support? Because this is not the New York that you remember from Song, the Big Apple, that people were proud to live there. You know, it's long gone from what I can tell. And I'm not a resident of New York. I don't live in New York. I've been there one time. Okay. I was there one time, and then only for a few hours. So I don't have that experience, but that's what I would want to ask. Back to the article. You are the mayor of New York City. This is why the people elected you, to solve problems, to make sure that Gotham doesn't fall. Yet you are acting like the guy with the end of days sign outside of Penn Station, a bystander to your own disaster. We don't need more rants. We need solutions. And let me look at a couple of comments here. Excuse me. Bingo says correct. John, but always talking to someone else. Lone says, damn right, it's extortion. Yeah, I had to quote that. Maybe I should do like a short on it and get 1 trillion views and actually make some money from YouTube for a change. I doubt it. I doubt it. I wouldn't get it. I wouldn't get it because the channel is targeted. I can prove it's targeted now. And I hesitate to do a video on it because I might get targeted even further. But I can prove it. As you know, I broadcast on 2 YouTube channels at a time, and I can prove it's not the content, but the channel that gets targeted, because every video on coffee gets a strike, and on Prepper University, it does not. Same content, broadcast at the same time with the same description. The only way that could happen is if the channel's targeted. Rodney says, interesting that Democrats insist the border remains wide open and then cry when they receive a tiny fraction of the consequence. True. Texas prepping says Texas should flood these progressive holes with illegal immigrants until they beg for the border to be closed. And that's the point. I think that's why that's being done, correct? Urban says, if the black mayor of New York tries deporting non-whites, then every race grifter in town would scream about him being racist. Wait for it. And Fluke Man says, perhaps what's happening to New York and Chicago is a good thing. If they voted a Republican mayor, they would only want it by 51, 52% at best. But now this is happening. Hopefully much more than 52% has woken up. Well, waking up and doing something are two different things. As I've said before, you can wake up a sheep, but he's still a sheep. Prime Mover says, sometimes I just say, screw my libertarian views and let's do what works. Bring back stop and frisk in New York City. And John says, I don't mind you being targeted. I like the big cat show. Well, no problem. Hey, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing as long as I can, regardless of whether they pay me or not. I don't even make enough for them to make a regular payment, because you have to get a minimum of, I think, $120 for them to give you a payment. I rarely get it. It's months. Urban says send them all to Martha's Vineyard. Yeah, that would be nice. Keisha says I agree with the stop and frisk as well. I used to be out at night and I saw what was out there. Yeah, no problem, Urban. But yeah, Mayor Adams. They continue on here, and again, this is a New York Post article, right? Yeah. It says Mayor Eric Adams warned that the raging migrant crisis will destroy New York City. James Messerschmidt from New York Post. First, let's lay the blame where it belongs, President Joe Biden. It's his open border policies and complete disregard for New York City that have fueled this crisis. Fellow Democrat Kathy Hochul has been no help, refusing to suffer any political backlash as governor for accepting migrants outside of New York City. Adams tore into President Biden for ignoring his pleas for help, saying the White House has given no support for the thousands of asylum seekers arriving each month. Pool via CNP, Stark's photo. No support for you don't need to give them support. You know what would be cheaper? You know what would be a lot cheaper? To put them back on square one. Go directly to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. They need to, if they had a charter flight, a nonstop charter flight going to Venezuela or Ecuador or somewhere as far south as possible, and put them on the plane and brought them down there and dumped them off and came back and paid the airport in Ecuador to receive them, gave, how it works in South America, a little grift, a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge money, they'll take it. It would be cheaper than what we're going through now. It would be cheaper to charter a flight down there and just dump them and pay off the airport down there to take them than to keep housing, clothing, feeding these people, sending them to school, paying for hotels to take them in, funneling that tax money. It would be cheaper to just dump them all down there and right back where they started. Right back where they started again. Sounds cruel? Chew on it. Dragon says Adams didn't tell his congregation that every state is having to deal with these illegals. It's not one community against the other. We are all being affected. That's true too. And Doc says Biden doesn't know who he is, let alone to be able to help someone out. Well, he only knows fake Biden. He only knows fake Biden. He knows that illusionary magician Biden that goes up on stage and tells you crazy stories of his childhood and upbringing that when you go and you look at the history aren't true at all, like how his son died in Iraq when he actually died years later here in the States from cancer, and he wasn't even in the military anymore, or how his house burned down, but it was actually a small kitchen fire that the fire department was there 20 minutes. And this is on record. It was in the newspapers at the time. You can't deny it, that it's there. It's anyone who legitimately wants to fact check it can find out about how he was. I know he brags about being in Scranton and he brags about being someplace else. I'm trying to remember. Or like he grew up in an all Jewish neighborhood, and then it's an all black neighborhood, and then it's all Hispanic neighborhood, then it's an all Polish neighborhood. He does it, whatever Biden fits in the right peg at the right time. Rodney says it would be cheaper to secure the border. Yeah, but I mean to deal with the ones that are already in here. Instead of paying for them to sit in a hotel and giving them food stamps and clothing allowances and sending them to school for years. Some of them have been here for a couple of years living off of the land. Yeah, the land of milk and honey, the fat of the land. Urban says in Canada, an increasing number of legal immigrants are complaining about the high cost of living and moving back to their respective origins to work and make money to afford their crappy condos. Armored says, do you think Vivek is sincere or just saying anything for votes? Yeah, anything for votes, most likely. Doc says, true, Biden is living in a fantasy. He is. He's absolutely in a fantasy world. It is insane. It is absolutely insane. And he makes it up as he goes along. And he tells these crazy stories that people don't believe. And then he always says, not kidding, or not a joke, or God's honest truth, or something like that. Like he's talking to a little kid and he's trying to convince him of some fantasy story about how he was on the moon with ant people, you know, not so stuff that doesn't make any sense, but people listen to it. I don't know if anybody even believes it. The media doesn't even go along with it anymore, and they call him out on it constantly, but nobody holds him to it. He doesn't stop. He keeps going. And this is another one from the Post. But again, pick your poison. I just randomly pick articles. It says Minnesota State Commission to design a new state flag due to Native American concerns. Yeah, I doubt that. I doubt they're that concerned. And I've dealt with Native Indians. I don't call them Native Americans. I call them Native Indians. But you remember my biggest exposure with them was when I was in Kansas. There's a lot of them there. And my understanding of it is, unless they were a wannabe activist, they don't care about any of this stuff. They don't care that a football team is called the Redskins. They don't care that a team is called the Kansas City Chiefs. They don't give a damn. They really don't care. But activists sure care, and politicians love to pretend to care, and activists love to pretend to care. But we'll go ahead and read the article so you can get their take on it. A state commission went to work Tuesday on designing a new state flag and seal for Minnesota to replace a current emblem in both that's considered offensive to Native Americans. And that's my question again. Do actual Native Americans consider it offensive? One of the main elements of Minnesota's state flag includes a prominent state seal against a blue background. The seal depicts a Native American riding off into the sunset while the white settler plows his field with his rifle leaning on a nearby stump. The imagery suggests to many that the indigenous people were defeated and going away while whites won and were staying. Who does that suggest that to? Who are these many? Who are these people? I want to see them. Not only do the state Dakota and Ojibwe tribes consider that offensive, but experts in the scientific and scholarly study of flags known as vexillology say it's an overly complicated design. Well, the new design's not going to be any less complicated, is it? Actually, it looks like he's just riding by. Here's the flag. It looks like they're just kind of greeting each other, doesn't it? Like he's riding by and he's like, "Hey, what's up?" That would be my interpretation of that. Like, "Hey, how you doing?" The guy's not running for his gun because he's scared. The Indian's carrying a spear. He's not trying to kill the guy. Maybe that's supposed to represent some kind of cooperation as the way that it was originally depicted. And all it is the state seal on a flag, complicated or not. Who cares what somebody from vexillology thinks, if it's complicated or not? And who are these people? I always wonder that. My mother used to say something like that, really pissed me off. Because it suggests to many that the indigenous people were defeated. Who are these many that it suggests it to? I want to see them. My mother used to say something to me that used to make me really angry all the time. Once I started thinking about it when I was young, everybody says, that was her line. Everybody says you're a bum. Everybody says you're a loser. Everybody says this and that. She used to say things like that to me. She was a very cruel woman. And one day the bulb came on when I was a kid. Who the hell is everybody? Who are these people? Name one. I'll confront them myself. Of course, she could never do it because there was no everybody. There wasn't an everybody. She was making it up. And so are these people. It's ridiculous. Helter says, reminds me of that old South Park episode where Chief wanted to change the current SP flag and most of the residents didn't. Yeah, or was it that the residents were all behind it, but then when they asked the kids couldn't figure out what was wrong with the flag. They saw it completely differently. I think I saw that episode. Prime Mover says India is now called Bharat. No more confusing them with white Americans or with Native Americans. Excuse me. I don't know where that came from. Guess they're Bharatans. Yeah, well, the British used to call it Hindustan. and then India. And Berat is actually their traditional formal name. So basically, they're suggesting call us what we always called ourselves and quit calling us India. And I can suck that up. I get it. If you're always calling yourself, it's like we always call ourselves America, Americans, or USA, something like that, United States. And if people called us purple guys, we're like, we're not purple. What the hell are you talking about? You know what I mean? And Anarchy says, yeah, the flag pretty much sums it up, but history is reality, not wishful thinking. Urban says the city of Montreal has decided not to reinstall a statue of John A. MacDonald that was pulled down by protesters in 2020. It will be installed somewhere else as a museum piece with contextuality. And Monkey says the everybody said is the same as saying assuming assume. Yeah, and you all remember what Benny Hill said about assume, don't you? Benny Hill had a monologue about it. When you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. And there you go. But this is ridiculous. I really don't see a problem with the flag. I doubt that Indian groups outside of a handful of wannabe activists are really that concerned or really give a crap about this. Again, I've talked to Native Indians. They don't care about that. I remember there was an interview process. I think it was over the Kansas City Chiefs trying to get them to change their name. And somebody actually went to the reservation and interviewed the people there. And he said about 88% of them, I'm trying to remember, it was more than 80. I want to say 88% didn't care one way or the other. But who are these people that we're always supposed to be championing for? That we're supposed to be, oh, we're standing up for the indigenous people. Yeah, I'm sure you are. I'm sure. Urban says, and in 2021, the Edmonton Eskimos football team was renamed to the Edmonton Elks. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous how far it goes because, even Eskimo Pie has changed their name. Remember the old, like, chocolate-coated ice cream bar? Eskimo Pie. It's not Eskimo Pie anymore. They changed it so not to offend Inuit people. Like Inuit people give a shit about Eskimo Pie. I mean, seriously. Bingo says Danny Masterson just got sentenced to 30 years for the R word. Really? And the guy from That 70s Show. That's crazy. And Keisha says, I think Indians care more about better living conditions than a flag. And part of the living conditions are their own fault because they won't leave the reservation because of the tax exempt statuses and because of the check that comes with it. But there's nothing out there. And they'll sit there and live in squalor and become alcoholics and drug addicts. And I know that sounds cruel, but go to one and look. Go to one and look. Talk to these people for real. Talk to the actual natives. I have. And many of them, I think almost everyone I've ever spoken to is a former drug addict or alcoholic that broke out of it and left the reservations to escape that lifestyle. It's a trap they set for themselves in a manner of speaking. But yeah, they'd like better. There's only so much you can do. Urban says, and let's not forget about the pancake syrup, formerly known as Aunt Jemima. No kidding. Because we don't want to hurt anybody's little feelings anymore. Now, this is something you get what you ask for. Moment here, talking about Hollywood. We're going to take a look at Hollywood real quick here, and this comes from Business Insider because they're concerned about the people on the writers' strike. And it says Hollywood walkouts have wiped $5 billion from California's economy, exceeding the analysts' estimates because they're still on strike. Hollywood's first double strike in over 60 years has dealt a $5 billion blow to California's economy. The entertainment industry has been largely on pause since the Writers Guild of America and the Actors Union, SAG-AFTRA, joined the picket line together. Now the consequences are reverberating across Los Angeles as the slowdown creates a knock-on effect for enterprises across the board. Caterers, dry cleaners, truckers, car rental companies, and other small businesses that support the movie-making industry all bear the brunt of the walkout, according to Kevin Cloden, chief global strategist at the Milken Institute, which conducted the research. Quote, All these different people who provide support services that make productions happen, they're getting nailed. We look at it and we talk to the people, and it was affecting restaurants and catering companies, affecting trucking companies, it was affecting welders, it was affecting construction people, it was affecting dry cleaners, it was affecting all sorts of businesses, he told Yahoo Finance last month. The eye-watering sum even outstripped analysts' expectations of the damage. Todd Holmes, an entertainment industry professor at Cal State Northridge, had predicted a $3 billion blow to California's economy in the first 100 days of the strike. The two unions have downed tools simultaneously for the first time since 1960 over the lack of income they're receiving from streaming platforms and their concerns about the disruptive impact that AI could have on their profession. Well, you're encouraging it now. You're showing, the thing is, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody gives a shit if you're on strike. You haven't produced anything halfway decent for years. In some instances, decades. We have lousy television shows. We have lousy comic books. We have lousy novels. We have lousy theater. Nothing is good. We have people on YouTube giving better performances than we're getting from these types of media. We go to movies, we get disappointed. Their movies have been so bad for the last 20 years that people nowadays mistake a mediocre film for a good one. You want money, write better. You're not guaranteed income as a writer. You're not guaranteed income as an actor. All you're doing is showing everybody that we don't need you. There's so much media already out there. Millions of TV shows, millions of hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of films of all genres, most of it better than anything been produced in the last 10 or 20 years. I've got a huge DVD library. My wife and I watch that. That's pretty much all we watch. We don't even watch modern shows because they're terrible. We watch vintage game shows. They're more fun than anything that's out now. What do we need these people for? That's all they've done is demonstrate they're not needed. Catching up here a little bit, All People says, ironically, it was not slave descendant blacks that wanted the Confederate statues removed. They wanted them left up because it's part of the history. It's the new blacks that wanted them gone. Dragon says, I always thought it was insane that actors, musicians, etc. made tons of money while media labor like house cleaning makes nothing. The way society operates is insane and greedy. All People says, you make a good point. Neither the Central Park 5 nor the West Memphis 3 were ever exonerated. They were only released due to pressure from brainwashed public like the Chandra Scherer killers. Yeah, if you go and you read that, they were involved in what happened. I don't know if I have enough time to get into it today, because we're getting close to the hour. But there was a mob of black youth and a handful of Hispanic youth. I mean, dozens of kids. They were running through Central Park, beating people half to death that night. They escaped the dragnet that was closing in on them. It started at about 9 p.m. Look this up. I'm not kidding. But between 9 and 1 p.m. or 9 and 1 a.m. and 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. in the morning, those 5 are the 5 that did not break through the line of police that were trying to catch them. Those are the 5 that got caught. They were involved. They did beat and rob people. Some of those people were in severe condition in the hospital for days. The woman in question was in a coma for 2 weeks and has permanent brain damage. One homeless person was nearly beaten literally to death. They were involved. She had been raped multiple times, but they couldn't pinpoint those 5 kids' DNA specifically to her. But they admitted to everything else that went on that night. They were not innocent. And Trump wasn't necessarily talking about them in his diatribe to the papers. You have to read his entire thing. It's actually a very impassioned, very sad message about what the hell is happening to my city. Rodney says, I encourage the actors and writers to continue striking. The collapse of Hollywood would be a net gain for society. I agree. Doc says tyrannical censorship equals YouTube. I agree with I know, believe me. Fluke Man says Heard Sound of Freedom is a good movie. I've heard that too. I haven't seen it though. But that was just a low budget pocket film. It wasn't a huge big budget Hollywood blockbuster that you're supposed to like or else. And Urban says the writer's strike exposed how talentless the stars are. Case study Strike Force 5, which is the name of a live stream with 5 late night hosts with incompetent, unfunny cringe fest. Helter says, on the flip side, we won't have to put up with the garbage being produced these days. We can watch the great movies and shows that were made in the past. With luck, it will be an extended strike. Yeah, the stuff that's already been done is far better. There hasn't been much good in the last few years. Like maybe 4% of the films that have been put out in the last decade are worth even looking at. Prime Mover says, as long as they weren't at the January 6th protest, that's all that matters. The teens are all right. No kidding. But anyways, we're at the top of the hour, so I will remind you all, if you are listening and not watching, this is Coffee Talk, and you can find me on YouTube at Coffee Talk Live or on Prepper University. And also remember, you can find me on Fistful of Dollars. Now I'm saying it. Somebody said that yesterday and it threw me off. Fistful of Radio, fistfulofradio.com. Monday through Thursday at 5 and on Friday at noon. One more here from Keisha. It says, I think they will do more reality shows during the strike. That's even worse. And those are all scripted and fake anyways. They're terrible. Terrible, terrible theater. People who can't even act, pretending to, with a halfway script that only tells them what to do but doesn't give them any lines. Reality TV is the death knell of society. But anyways, with that, I will go ahead and sign off. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And we will see you again tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel.